Ask the Coach 10 with Nick Sellers. How are you, Nick?
I'm very well, thank you. Just back from holiday. Had to work twice as hard this week to catch up after 2 weeks away. You know how it goes.
Definitely. Hopefully, this week's topic's quite relevant then, which is burnout, and it's a topic that
Mm.
frequently comes up in conversations with professionals when I'm speaking to them when they're considering a career change. So, in doing a bit of research for this, I'd looked at a survey from a few years ago, and it said that 99% of accountants surveyed admitted to experiencing burnout at some point, which
Yeah.
is quite a staggering statistic. So, Nick, just to start with the basics, what exactly is burnout and how can we recognise it in ourselves and others?
Okay. It's a good starting point, that Andrew. And I'm not medically qualified. Okay, so I need to say that first off. But as far as I would make the observation, as far as I can see, burnout is when you get to the point where there is a breakdown. It's when you cannot face the workplace, you cannot face a certain situation. It's where something that you've coped with fine in the past actually just, you've reached the end. There's no more energy, there's no more gas in the tank, as the Americans would say. You just can't go on.
Helps.
So I hope I've not oversimplified something that's probably more complicated than that. But
Mhm.
that for me is burnout. It's when you just cannot do it.
So, how would it manifest itself, Nick, in your kind of day to day work and personal life?
So it can manifest itself in many ways. We're all individuals. We're all different. I've known people who've never suffered from a panic attack in the past, who've started having panic attacks in certain situations. I've seen it in the sense that you've had somebody who is normally really reliable in meeting deadlines and getting projects completed, who actually starts to fail to do all of that and actually just cannot meet the deadlines and so forth. People that were previously reliable who start to become unreliable. So it can manifest itself, I think, in a lot of different ways, or at least in the lead up to it. For me, burnout is kind of when you reach that final point,
Mhm.
where actually there's that cessation of function. You just cannot function anymore. But there are probably indicators that start coming to light in the lead up to that.
Mhm.
I hope
So,
that makes sense.
absolutely. So if you begin to recognise the symptoms of burnout, either in yourself or others around you, what should you do?
I think you need to be open about it. I definitely don't think it's a question of just muddling through. I think, and really, one of the things that I would hope that we all work in a workplace where we can raise our hand and we can say, to the boss, we can say to our colleagues, um, I'm not coping well. I'm not going to make this deadline. I don't feel as though I can get my head around this. I'm not focusing very well. So raise your hand and actually say that it's not an admission of failure. It's actually an admission of something's not quite right. And it's good for us to be able to be open about that. We don't always work in an environment where we feel comfortable doing that. Now, that doesn't mean to say there's something wrong with the environment. It might be us, because we don't like to admit that there's something wrong. Typically, we might be prepared to kind of like just hang on in there and hope we can make it. But it's not wise to do that, at least not for too long, anyway.
So how can you differentiate normal work related stress and compared to the more serious condition of burnout? Is there a scale where people slide in from extensive periods of stress into burnout? How does it tend to happen?
I'm not sure about a scale, Andrew, but I did actually recently have a conversation with a colleague who is a stress management coach. And, stress manifests itself in a lot of different ways. Now, she is actually qualified. She's a GP, qualified GP. And so she takes a lot more interest in stress. And in the conversation, she corrected me because I talked about a little bit of stress being okay, and she straight away, I think because medically it may not be, corrected me and said, no, not stress, pressure is okay. So if we talk about work related stress, we might be talking about pressure at work is okay because it stretches us, it enables us to do a bit more. Just like when we go to the gym, we put the muscles under pressure, we lift more weight, we stretch them a bit further, but it's with a view to those muscles becoming bigger and stronger, or having greater stamina. And it's the same for us mentally and in the workplace, that actually being under pressure, having deadlines to meet, knowing that we've not got lots of time to do things can actually be quite healthy for us. But when it crosses the line from being pressure to being stress, that's when we need to take account. And in our conversations together, we've talked a lot about reflecting, and one of the things I think we all should do is to reflect on how we're feeling about a situation, about a workload. Is it the sort of thing that's actually, wow, that was a busy day, and we can write down, because reflection is thinking about things, but actually part of reflection is actually starting to just jot down maybe some notes, some thoughts that help us to solidify what's going through our heads. It's really useful that we can actually reflect and take account of whether that was pressure or
Mm-hmm.
whether that was unmanageable stress.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's one or the other, we can decide what we want to do next. Avoidance is not good in either case. We can't avoid doing something about it. If it's pressure, then maybe we can reorganize ourselves. Maybe we can actually say, yeah, when month end comes around, I'll do it this way, or I'll stop taking meetings on other topics, or something like that, so that I can focus my attention, my energy, my time on something which is a very necessary part of the timetable in the workplace. If it's stress related, avoidance is actually to ignore the problem, and that's not necessarily good. So ways that we can deal with it might be that we talk to somebody, talk to our boss, talk to a colleague that we trust, talk to, our spouse, our partner, whoever, somebody that we feel that we can just kind of open up to and at least get it off our chest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an important differentiation you make, Nick, between pressure and stress. I mean, pressure can be quite enjoyable, and it can actually push you on to achieve greater things. But I agree, once it slips into consistent stress, it can become quite damaging. Has there ever been times in your career, Nick, that you've experienced burnout?
Um, I can't think of a time when I've got as far as that kind of total. I talked about total breakdown, total inability to function. But there have been times when I think I've come close to it. Where there's been so many deadlines, and maybe when I've been working in areas that I'm unfamiliar with, where it's not just kind of like learning new stuff, it's learning new stuff with consequences attached to it. And the consequences being that if we don't meet the deadline, if we don't achieve this, the consequences are actually really quite severe. So there's been times when I think we've come close to that, when I've come close to that, but I can't think of a time when I've actually had that breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I have worked with people who have, and the breakdown is not terminal, let's say. It doesn't need to be terminal. So recognizing things as the stress builds, or as we get towards that point of breakdown, I think is really, really important. But it doesn't mean to say that, our career's over if we do break down.
Yeah, definitely. The only time I've come close would be during COVID, I think. Partly because, and it's strange because it's the quietest I've ever been business wise, but it
Right.
was just a mixture of both my wife and I were working at the time I'm running the business, and it was a case of trying to cover two jobs in one day when you're in the house with two young kids. So it was a case of one of us would get up early at 5 in the morning, do a few hours work, and then kind of relay each other during the day. But it was, with two young kids and two busy jobs, it was kind of like 5 in the morning till 10 at night, day
Yeah.
in, day out. And I think to add to that, the business was very, very quiet because no one was hiring during the middle of lockdown. And it was actually the stress of being quiet and the financial situation the business was going into. Thankfully, it's recovered, but the whole kind of, it just made me really not want to open my laptop. It made me not want to particularly get out of the bed and get out of bed in the morning and get on with things, which is very unlike me. And
Yeah.
it became a real strain. And I think I did recognise it eventually, and I just took some time completely away from work, and I just focused on spending time with the kids and looking after myself, and it did go away, but it did take a while for me to get my head back into feeling like doing any work again, which is
Yeah.
yes, it's
So,
quite
so actually, the coach in me was actually going to ask you, what did you actually do to cope? And you've explained that between the two of you, you kind of worked out a change of routine in terms of, you've got two youngsters there who are needing attention, both of you trying to work in the same room, metaphorically or literally, so that you did actually work some stuff out. But even with what you worked out, it didn't deal with everything, with every aspect. And so there would be those financial pressures. There'd be other things that came along, and so there's more thought often needs to go in than just kind of working out a new routine. There has to be a kind of a deeper look at just exactly what is it we're dealing with here and what do we do next?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it manifested itself, I suppose, in an apathy for work, certainly, and probably even for spending time with the kids, and just a bit of a general apathy. Which I think the only way for me was to really break away from that was to just say, "Right, something has to give," and it was at that stage it was work because it wasn't that particularly busy anyway, and I was kind of pushing myself to be busier. So.
Mm.
But I think you need almost that break sometimes, and just that time to reset before going back into it. I think it would have been quite hard to get away from that apathy had I just tried to drive on through it actually. So yeah, for me that break
Well,
helped. Although I don't think it was at the stage of burnout, but I felt like it was certainly getting there.
yeah, but we've talked often about the need to recharge batteries. We're not machines. We are human, and work is important to us. There are the fundamentals of life. Air, water, food, all of that, human interaction, the ability to be who we are. And work sometimes can kind of like take over, but then when that's suddenly removed, there's a vacuum created, especially for those that really enjoy work. And so, we work hard, the work's changed or removed totally, and there's that need to sort of just take a step back and actually figure out how do I deal with this? What do I do now to recharge the batteries? What do I do now to actually maintain things like mental, physical health, in order to keep ourselves in the right place, so that when things resume, and also maybe it's an opportunity to plan. We don't often get a chance to plan much when we're working hard because the demands of the day take time, and so we deal with them. And sometimes we get time thrust on us, like during a lockdown, and we can actually start to take stock of what is it we'd like to do. But of course, this is all theoretical until it actually happens.
So what would your advice be if somebody's at the stage of burnout and they're in a busy role, they feel that they need that break? For instance, they might not have any holiday allowance left for the rest of the year. How do they broach that? Is it a case, should somebody be taking it seriously enough that they should be going, should
Yeah.
they be going to the doctor or should they be going to HR? I mean, my concern, in all honesty, if I was in someone's position who felt like that, if you go to HR, you potentially make yourself vulnerable to, if there is if they're taking a look around who's in the business and somebody's had time off through stress, it shouldn't happen. But I mean, I think you're more susceptible then to be, to be in a position where less likely to maybe gain a promotion or more likely to be managed out of the business. Now, I've seen it happen in the past actually before, where
Yeah.
someone's been managed out of the business due to being off, actually because of bereavement, which was completely wrong, but it did then impact their position when they rejoined the business.
It's a balancing act, isn't it? We want to be good employees. We want to work hard for our employer, but we are human, and things happen that affect us. I'd reiterate that when we talk about burnout, we are talking about the extreme end of a spectrum. So when we just, if you will, cease to function as normal, and that can have quite a recovery attached to it, in order to be able to move back from that position. So I would say, do be open about how you're feeling, and be open about how you're feeling as early as possible. And we do need to maybe be careful about who we talk to in the workplace. Yes, we want to be open and honest about things, but if that's going to have some effect on our career for the future, but then I think employers are becoming much wiser to the need to look after people. Let's face it, getting good people isn't easy.
No.
Retaining good people is not easy, and retaining good people in a healthy state is not easy. And employers recognize, I think, they have a part to play. So there will be help. You probably, if you're feeling, say you, if one is feeling that you're under stress and it's actually leading towards something as catastrophic as burnout, you probably are not the only one that HR or your line manager has had to work through something with. They've probably experienced it before. They, excuse me, they probably have a procedure, a process in place, something that they can instigate that will help you through providing resources, counselling, and so forth that can actually deal with things. You mentioned a bereavement. Often stress comes with a life event that was unexpected. It's not simply just the build-up of pressure at work, because when it's a build-up of pressure, then there'll probably be a kind of a letting off of steam that gives an indication of how things are with the individual early on. Somebody vents in the office, has a go at their boss. We can tell that the pressure's been building. But sometimes something like a relationship breaking down, or the loss of a loved one, or something like that just kind of brings about this kind of real stress that pushes us right to the very edge. And employers have seen that before. They've worked through it, and hopefully everybody works in an environment where that's taken seriously. And even though there's maybe no holiday time left, maybe there's a way that your employer can actually work out some way of saying, take time out now. And whether it's through taking sick leave, or whether it's just through having some personal time, and maybe the hours can be made up later on when things have resolved themselves. But I would stress, let's avoid getting to burnout. Let's recognize early on that we are stressed, that there's something's happened, and that we need to talk to somebody.
I think the point you make there, Nick, it's the times I've seen it in other colleagues in the past has maybe been when it has coincided, when a busy work period has coincided with a major life event, such as a breakup of a relationship, a bereavement, a change in life circumstances. And I
Mm.
think it shouldn't necessarily be seen as a sign of weakness. It's just an
Yeah.
unfortunate circumstances that can accumulate for a period of time and into that person, maybe not being able to operate at the best to the best of their ability. If you begin to recognise that in a colleague or someone you work closely with, how should you approach that with them? Should you approach that with them, or what should you do in that scenario?
I think if we have a good relationship, or if we have an open enough relationship with somebody, we can say to them, how are you? How are things going? Is there anything I can help with? If they will not engage, you can't prize it out of them, but you can you can be aware of things. You can keep your eyes open for uh, behavior or emotions that are not normal with a person. It might be that you decide that you want to go talk to somebody yourself in HR about, or somebody in the management team about something that you're observing in somebody else. It's not gossip; it's actually genuine help that you're seeking for them. So I think we can be mindful of what we're observing colleagues, and do something that's going to help them. But even just being there for them, being open to spending an extra few minutes having a chat over a coffee, letting them vent, letting them get things out can be really helpful. So I think just being prepared to do something that's not normal in usual circumstances maybe will help somebody deal with unusual circumstances.
It's interesting since post COVID, hybrid working's become a much more commonplace, and remote working's become a lot more common. So suppose it's harder maybe spot the signs of burnout in
Mm.
colleagues, especially in a remote environment. It might be hard to spot those signs. But on the flip side, potentially less of a commute, more leisure time. If you've got a 2 hour commute each day, that's giving you 2 hours back in your day. So
Yeah.
it's been interesting that post COVID, you can see there's an increased risk of burnout, but maybe that's countered by an improved work life balance in certain circumstances.
Well, that's it. Everybody's different. We're all unique. Some people will benefit greatly from the fact they don't have a commute. Other people are suffering now because they don't have a commute.
Mhm.
Because that for some, the kind of the commute to the office and from the office mark the beginning and the end of the working day. When that gets taken away, what do they do? So yeah, we're all individuals, and I think this is where line managers, somebody that manages a team, however large it is, needs to keep in regular touch. If you're not seeing people in the workspace, in the workplace, then make sure that you're checking in with them regularly. Make sure that, if there's deadlines to be met and they're struggling to meet those deadlines, that you work out a way of taking some of that pressure off a bit so that the work gets done, and the deadline's met, but it's not to the detriment of the individual. So any line manager needs to keep in touch with their team, needs to be aware of how they're doing, how they're feeling, and hopefully every member of their team will feel open to talk to their boss about something which just isn't working well. You mentioned, COVID, working from home, 2 young kids. I know of lots of colleagues who really, really struggled. They just didn't live in an environment where two adults could work together across the kitchen table and keep the 2 or 3 kids happy in the lounge while that was going on. They had to change things to make that work. And, we're all individuals. Working from home's been great for some people, it's been a disaster for others. Hybrid working might be the answer, or it might be one of the answers.
It's interesting, actually. I think some people have struggled who've always worked in the office all their life, and that's all they've ever known. Then they've had a period of remote working for a year or two, and then there is companies now looking to get people back into the office full time. And I know I've got a couple of friends actually who've really, really struggled with going back into the office,
Yeah.
and it's caused them a lot of anxiety. Just go back into that office environment again, although it didn't bother them pre-COVID. It now bothers them to the extent where they dread going to work in the morning in the way that they did in previous. It's a strange change. Um, just a final bit of advice then, Nick. So if somebody's watching this, they feel that they could be on the verge of burnout, they've got a combination of pressure within, and let's say stress, which is the correct term you used earlier, within their personal and professional life. What's the first thing they should be doing?
I think identifying what the source or sources of the stress is. I'm just thinking back to, you mentioned that those colleagues there who previously didn't have any problem going into the office, but now find themselves feeling stressed. I'd be interested to know what's the source of the stress, because it's an environment that they were used to previously, had some time out from, and now they're feeling stressed. What changed? Was it the fact that they had greater freedom and they just don't like the constraints of being in the office? But we have to kind of examine and figure out what's causing that and why. Same where somebody is feeling that pressure building, that stress, and they're heading towards burnout, it's important to get to the root cause and actually figure out just what it is. Is it that the failure of a relationship or a bereavement has just been the straw that's broken the camel's back? Or is it actually something else that's actually been building that actually makes things untenable for them? Financial pressures can grow over a long period of time if our salary isn't enough to cover our monthly expenses and stuff like that. So we need to get to the root cause and then really seek help. And we might need to seek help in finding out what that cause is.
Mhm. It's interesting. One of a good friend of mine, very good friend, and he's the issue that he has is he has social anxiety now post COVID. He didn't have before, so he finds that just being in and around a busy office, surrounded by people, just gives him a high anxiety level that he never had
Right.
before. He didn't notice. It's strange how it's only, I suppose, been triggered, or it's only come in through working from home for that period where he suddenly he feels relaxed at home, and then he goes into the office and he just has a high anxiety level in the office. It's strange.
Yeah. And is the anxiety, is it caused by, the perceived risk of infection? Is it caused, because you're in an environment where you're with a lot of other people? Is it the general ambient noise levels that's causing that? Is it something to do with access to daylight?
Yeah.
There could be a number of different things. It could just be the feeling of greater pressure when actually the boss is in the same place as me at the same time.
Mhm.
But getting to the root of that, actually understanding what's causing that, and then hopefully figuring out why, will then kind of open up the opportunity to think about what could relieve some of that pressure.
Mhm. Thankfully, his employers quite understanding. It's a big US financial services company. They've given him counselling, which he says certainly helped. And the
Yeah.
company's been very supportive. Uh, but I don't think he's quite back to the way he would have been previous in terms of being happy in the office environment. But
Yeah.
you know,
We change over time as well, Andrew. It's where we were at the age of 12 is different to where we're at 16 and at 25 and at 30 and 40 and 50 and so forth. So, we maybe need to recognize that what has served us well for 20 years in the workplace is not actually really a useful, helpful, valuable part of our future. And considering how we might change our circumstances could actually be, a good indicator for how we actually restore the balance that we want in life. So, we shouldn't just think that because it always worked for us in the past, it's always going to work in the future.
yeah, I think it's a great point, Nick, and it's a point you often make about evaluation and constantly evaluating where you're at, and then taking periods just to step back and assess things. And it's really important to do that. Yeah, great advice as always, Nick. Really enjoyed your insight and input, and hopefully you'll join me again for next week.
Absolutely. As always, Andrew, I've enjoyed the conversation and I look forward to talking with you again next week.
Thanks again, Nick.
Thank you.